Hi, everyone. So we're going to discuss a very important topic, as Natasha alluded to, the role of impact investing for African startups, and particularly the role on growth for for African startups. So I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves, as well as give me their thoughts around how they view impact investing, what metrics they sort of look at, and how they define it within their various organizations. I'm from Knife Capital, so we are not impact investors as defined. We are commercially led, but we do lead with ESG thinking when we look at our investments. So it's equally something that we consider, but not that we're defined by in the defined corporate sense. So I'm going to hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll facilitate the discussion from there.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello everyone, my name is Saad Syed and I'm the CEO of a company called Chinosis, which is we're kind of like a pretend startup, right? So we're a platform business within MTN, and we're that kind of oxymoron, a corporate startup, go figure, right? Corporate startup, doesn't make sense. It's an interesting gig. We are run, MTN, you could say, operates like a VC, and we're expected to drive hard in terms of outcomes. So we're held very accountable in terms of building the business out. We manage our burn rate. We try and operate as a traditional startup would, although we do have the luxury of having a massive organization behind us, but we don't take them for granted. Impact investing, on a personal level for me, I feel, whether we like it or not, we're all connected, right? And I think just focusing on a very perhaps a short-term return on a specific investment maybe isn't the right measure of an investment. So maybe we should be open to thinking about the impact of any investment to the wider community. If I take an example, and we should be conscious of that, if you invest in arms companies, you have a vested interest in war to realize a return. But is that good for society? Maybe, maybe not. I don't want to get too political, but for me, impact investing should be investing.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? Now you can hear me. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Moreno. I'm the chairwoman of Ring Capital. Ring Capital is a European investment fund that focuses 100% of its asset on entrepreneurs who only want to do good to the planet. As we are going to speak about impact investment, we all have to understand that doing good doesn't necessarily go against doing well. And each time I speak about impact investment, people ask me if it's about solidarity economy. We may call it this way, but what we do is reminding us that every single company should have a positive impact, whether it is on the planet or on the people. But somehow, in our journey to economic growth, we have put all our energy on economic growth, and we have completely forgotten our responsibility over the planet and over the people. I was born in a small archipelago where there are less than 500,000 inhabitants. It is Cabo Verde. In 1947, half of the population of my country died because of the climate change impact. On that time, we had years and years without water, without clean water, without rain. And I know from the bottom of my heart what it is losing life because we are not doing the right thing to save the people. Hence, I was not born at that time, but this story is still in the heart of my family, and my ancestors have died because of that. And I decided that one day, if I had a chance to have an impact on the world, I would work on this kind of activity. So I'm lucky to be on this Ring Capital adventure, but I realize how much we all need together as African or not African. We need to consider this continent as the new place to rethink about the way we are treating this planet, because this house is the only one we have, and we are supposed to leave it in a good situation for our kids, and that's definitely not the road we are taking so far. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's okay. I've got it. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy, and I'm from Wesgrow. And Wesgrow is the official tourism, trade, and investment promotion agency of the Western Cape. Now, I am not from a funder or an investor as yourselves, but Wesgrow's goal is to position the Western Cape as a global competitive leading regional economy. And we look at various sectors. And my work involves driving and facilitating investment and innovation into different sectors where across the economy, and mine specifically into education. Now, I mean, I've heard your stories, and it is really inspiring because that is it, right? Part of driving investment into different segments, and my focus is particularly on education, it basically tells the African story beyond just the borders of the Western Cape where we are situated today in this beautiful city. So for me, whenever we talk Africa, we are recognized for either our natural or physical resources, right? But we are a lot more than that. And when we're thinking about investment, impact investment, and my thinking around how would I define that, is that there's the business side of things where it focuses on growing an economy, which is what we need to boost the African share of international investments through startups. Startups plays a vital role in driving growth and development in areas. But then on the other side, something you said is, how do we leave this behind? So it is as important to invest in driving economic growth, but also important into where we invest that in and what legacy that leaves behind. So I see impact investment as an innovative model, rethinking how we look and think about investment and how that can transform the legacy we leave behind.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. My name is Russell Julius. I am a venture partner with the African Leadership Academy, more specifically the venture building fellowship called Anzisha Prize. And we work with what we refer to as VYEs, that is very young entrepreneurs. And we help them, so age 16 to 22 upon entry, so very young entrepreneurs. And we essentially help them through the 3-year program, stabilize their businesses, de-risk their businesses, and by the time that they graduate the program, we hope that they are effectively and sustainably participating in the economy, that they have enabled their communities and their teams to also do the same, and that they understand what investor readiness looks like. We know that entrepreneurs will in their lifetime probably have more than one venture. So as much as we look at the current venture that they join the program with, we also focus a lot on actual founder development, so that down the line, venture capitalists and investors also have a deeper pipeline of quality deals to focus on. And on the back of that fellowship, we have Young Entrepreneur Fund, which I co-manage. It's a fund that's part of ALA. And we do revenue-based concessional loans, and up to $50,000. So small ticket size, but for the stage of these ventures, it really does make a big difference. Impact investing for me, really what my co-panelists have mentioned, really hits the nail on the head for me as well. But then just to underline, any kind of investment, it's hard to not have an impact investment in Africa because there are so many issues, right, that need addressing. So anything that really, in my view, that contributes to job creation, access to better education, access to clean drinking water, better healthcare, all of these things plus many more. For me, this is impact investing.
Thanks for that, Russell. Yeah, these topics are always, from a theoretical point of view, a little bit above water for most of the audience. From a practical point of view, I'm glad that our panel's diversified. We've got a startup. We've got someone representing the city of Cape Town and the Western Cape. We've got investors. Elizabeth, you mentioned the fact that it is not just economic transformation that one needs to look at, right? You were touching a lot on the environmental leg of things. And Sid, you mentioned that it's the long-term view as opposed to the short-term view that needs to be looked at. At a practical level, when you are raising funds, which ultimately is going to keep the startup going and grow your business, how are you pitching it to investors from an impact perspective now, that it's the long-term view and not necessarily profits right now that matter? And to you, Elizabeth, without economic transformation, how are we ensuring that the environmental leg and side of things is kept sustainable? How do you look at the two in balance?
So in terms of the long term, I didn't actually talk about what problem we solve. So our mission is to totally change the software development landscape across Africa. And the way we're going to do that is by building ecosystems, leveraging the power of APIs to exchange data and services. And we're getting a lot of traction within the financial services community, within government. We were talking to a government agency in one country who have 1,500 sets of data and services which they feel, if they're made available into the market, can change people's lives, can change the lives of people. So that's what we're solving. That doesn't happen overnight. That requires patience and a sustainable approach to the business. And I think people understand that. And I think you made a really good point, Russell, that, I think investing in Africa has to be impact investing because, we need to, if you look at other parts of the planet, they had impact investing perhaps a century ago to elevate people to a certain level to create that market, which I think needs to happen in Africa. So I think people are buying into that. And I think also the data is really compelling. If you look at the demographics of Africa compared to the world, there's this massive community of young people who are super aspirational, super smart. We need to make sure we empower them with the tools, and if we get the tools right, this continent can, become a powerhouse at a global level. So I think certainly the organization that I work for, is a big organization, and it does take its responsibility to serve Africa very seriously. And I think we as Chinosis are an embodiment of that, but there are other organizations, across the domain who are actually looking at our model and looking, potentially interested in investing as well, which doesn't happen often with a corporate startup where other corporates are keen to participate. So I think I'd summarize it in, Africa needs this. The potential is massive. And if you deliver the right capability and deliver value, the upside is exponential, significant.
It's interesting to see that most of the people, whether investors or entrepreneurs, they keep asking the question, what is impact investment?
Yeah.
And I understand this question because at the end of the day, look at the people who have pitched before we came on stage. Whether you speak about ed tech, health tech, agri-tech, fintech, all these kind of businesses do have an impact on people's lives. But whether you sell weapons or you sell products that may help kids who are far from the first school, or you help families, who do not have access to electricity, then you clearly see the impact you may have on people. How you manage to reduce poverty in families. So as you said, what better place than Africa to do the new impact business for the future? When we speak about climate change, what are we talking about? We are talking about a continent that has probably the best renewable energies on Earth, but you still have more than 60% of our kids who are doing their homework, their lessons with a candle. Isn't it crazy that we didn't have a chance to build the right infrastructure, to develop our schools, to develop the houses, to prevent our girls from doing 20 kilometers to find clean water? Isn't it crazy? So, yeah, definitely Africa is probably the next best place in terms of impact investment. Now, you know, I used to be the vice president for HP Africa, and I was managing the 54 countries, and I used to work a lot with the startups. And I realized at that time that very often when they came to me, because I was calling them to tell me about their business, how we can work together, very often they didn't want to share everything. You know, it was like, I don't want you to steal my idea. Come on, I'm the VP of HP Africa. I called you to come and explain what you are doing and how you are doing it. And I think our startuppers, of course, it's taking risks when you share your ideas and when you share the thing. It's your kid, you know, your startup is your kid and you don't want to share it. But if you don't share it, if you don't share the data, if you're not transparent with what you are doing and how you are doing it, how do you want people to put their money on your project? So that's one thing, transparency. The second thing is, how are you going to measure the impact of your business? You know, the intentionality of the entrepreneur, of the startupper, is critical, because you have some people who are pretending to have impact because it's cool and it's trendy. But at the end of the day, when you keep asking the guy or the woman, unfortunately there are too few, but when you ask them, so tell me, why are you doing it? How are you going to do it? They are not capable to tell you how they will be measuring the outcome of their impact. Then it becomes an issue, because it means that you're not sincere in your commitment. And we need this sincerity, because we see the result of not doing impactful businesses, right? So this is the second topic. And the third topic is the scalability. We all have here a nice and beautiful project in mind that we would like to implement, but we know that it's not scalable. And we shouldn't forget that doing impactful business is not about, how to say that, it's not philanthropy, it's business, right? So if you put your money in my business because I'm doing well, and the more I will do well, the more I will be performing, because I'm doing the right thing for our communities, for our continent, and for the world. So if we are transparent, if we know how to measure the outcome, and if we are thinking about the way we are expand this business, and we are thinking long-term and not short-term, and return on investment, of course it's important, but it has to be more than that. That's the new way of doing business.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think very, very well said, so you guys can clap hands for that. I just out of interest, and I'm going to pose this one to you, Russell, on the back of that, because transparency is a big one. It's a big one for the investors, a big one for the startup, right? So there are many who are saying that they're impactful investors, but aren't actually following impactful metrics, and many startups are saying they're making an impact. Outside of contributing to job growth, alleviating poverty, you know, the standard ones that you throw out from a sustainable development goal perspective. What are you looking at specifically as an investor, and what would you advise to startups to show you that would stand out for that startup when you are going to pitch back to your investment committee on investing or not investing in this idea?
Thanks for that, Tandy. So there are a few areas of impact we look at, but I want to say the primary one is economic empowerment. So in our view, if an entrepreneur can come from a village in, say, Mpigi, which is a district in Uganda where I was just a few weeks ago, and I'll use a live example to answer your question. So went to Mpigi, one of the fellows in our program, and she has built, along with a co-founder, a protein feeds, animal protein feeds business. So from the black soldier fly's eggs, they go through the whole process, the larvae, they dry them with a solar drying rack, and they sell those to the smallholder livestock farmers, which there are many of in Uganda. So they focus on chickens and then pigs, right? So for us, beyond her as a 21-year-old lady now being able to participate in the economy and her team, she also then, just through the very fiber of her business, empowers those smallholder farmers to grow better livestock so that they can sell more to the abattoirs, and it's kind of a beautiful circular system, right? So for us, when we look at a business model, the impact that that business model delivers shouldn't be an add-on. It shouldn't be we're doing our business and then we're taking some of our profit to go and to go well. As important as that is, we look at, just by doing your business well, what kind of impact is that delivering? And what this does is, even when you as an investor step away or you exit, or when this person graduates the program, you know that that impact is going to continue to be delivered, because it wasn't an add-on just to satisfy investor requirements. It was actually, it's the purple car, right? It's built into how the business operates. So that's one of the ways we try to ensure that the impact is there and it continues on. But more to your point, economic participation is for us the main driver.
Which is a very important point for South Africa in particular. On that point, and just going off Russell's point on that, Wendy, from a Western Cape government perspective, are you guys looking at certain sectors, noting that this is more or less one of the startup hubs in Africa overall? Are you guys sector specific when you're looking at where you are investing and deploying more of your resources, or is it agnostic?
It's a very good question. So it's sector agnostic, because you'll find that, you mentioned it earlier, we've got a great uptake in various industries in Africa, in South Africa specifically. If you look at the green energy space, for example, there's a booming industry around that. But have we really capitalized and really dug deep enough into that to build that out sustainably? You spoke about health tech and fintech, and of course we've got beautiful startups that presented their solutions right now. I think from our point of view, we have to acknowledge that there's a growth in sectors within South Africa and within Africa. And as an agency, we are always looking at what those sectors are, what are the challenges they are facing, what role we can play to unlock those challenges for startups, for local businesses, in order for us to attract international investment, right? The big thing I come across in my role is the perception that we are the underdog, right? And it's something in the education space, I'm constantly, that's a constant battle. But can I tell you, I mentioned this earlier, that we are recognized for our resources, but we don't give ourselves credit enough for our ingenuity and creativity. It's in those challenges that we face that we come up with these brilliant ideas. If you look at the startups that just pitched, I sit there and inspired by, this is coming from us. And these are great avenues to venture into. So as an agency, we look at those particular things. But we go a little deeper, where we look at what are things that are hindering the progress those sectors can be making. What kind of engagements or interactions should we be having? And conversations like with yourself, Russell, those are things that we do on a continuous basis. And then recognizing where we are leading international and African continent, so we can leverage that strength. For example, EdTech, right? We had them present on EdTech as well. The Western Cape is the strongest EdTech ecosystem in South Africa. More than half of the EdTechs is founded and located right here. And some of them have been acquired through acquisitions by big international companies. Why? Because of our talent, our resilience, our creativity, and our ingenuity. That is second to none. So I think that when we are looking at our sectors, the way that we are going to fund or invest in startups, let's look at beyond just what the business proposition is from a sustainability point of view. You mentioned the economic impact that they can make, but that's one side of it. What about the social and the environmental impact? And that then breeds the question around what are the challenges when we're talking about impact investment? Because if how we measure or standardize the impact scale. So as an investor, and I mean, you guys are looking at this all the time, is there a way for us to re-look how we look at Africa? Because some investors see it as high risk, but then if we are looking at the impact it can have in society, in economic, and the growth and development of us as a continent, shouldn't we look different at the measurements we put in place for that? Secondly, we've got legal and hurdles that needs to be jumped through. How are we working together to unlock that? And then I think the last thing from my side is just in terms of continuity.
Yeah.
How do we sustain not just the startups entering an industry or an activity within that can have great potential, but how do we sustain, grow that sustainably in the long run?
Thanks for that, Wendy. Yeah, I think that's a very important closing point on the sustainability, and something Russell touched on, to say that you will invest in a startup where it's at its core, the function of what it does, and not necessarily as a result of trying to get money in from an investor. And another point that you touched on as well is just discussing around, that's why these topics are so important, discussing around the challenges that, startups face, and we've got quite a couple in the audience here as well. So I want to hand over to the audience if we do have time for questions that they may have for the investors. But before I do that, I'll hand back to you, Russell, and then closing remarks from the panel.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention a few things that Wendy mentioned sparked this thought. So in our portfolio with Anzisha at African Leadership Academy, we have about 50-50, I want to say, startup versus SME. And when I say SME, I mean more your traditional, say, non-digitized businesses, right? And Saad mentioned this earlier. If we look at the mature markets now, they did impact investing in their markets maybe a century ago. And those SME markets are now mature and allow the startup market to flourish, right? Because there's buying power, there's market for a startup. When we look at EdTech, when we look at a solution like the gentleman from Cote d'Ivoire mentioned, the healthcare payments thing, these still need citizens who have money to have medical insurance in the first place, or to be able to go to subscribe to the EdTech solution. And in our view, SMEs provide this kind of market, develops this kind of purchasing power within the market. So we think that a big part of impact investment for startup growth is also making sure that you're investing in SMEs so that that market, the SME sector, can really grow and stabilize and mature.
Taking Africa to the world, in other words. I'm saying taking Africa to the world, which is, the long-term view of impact investment.
Would you allow me to,
yes, sure,
maybe before we give the floor
please
to the people, we cannot speak about impact investment leaving behind 50% of the human population. And I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I'm really tired with the hypocrisy that we see around female-led startups. 1%. For those of you who were here at the beginning of this morning, only 1% of the private capital goes to startups led by women. It's really a shame. It's really a shame when you consider that women are working like hell to contribute to the economy of the world. I'm not even talking about Africa. More than 85% of the agribusiness is led by women in the continent. They own less than 2% of the lands. And when they need money to develop the business, to feed their family, they don't find it because of all the prejudices, stereotypes, and bias that we have in our mind. And I'm very tired to hear everybody saying, oh my God, it's so important, we should do something. And for the last 20 years, we have done nothing. So we have to take our responsibility on hands here and wonder whether we are really doing something, and if we are not, we should just shut up.
I agree. Yeah, and we will close on that note, which I think is a very powerful note. I mean, the startups that pitched just now in the startup round are a reflection of exactly what you're saying. How many of them were female-led versus male, right? And then how much of the money is going that way. So I agree with you. We often have these conversations time and time again at these conferences and elsewhere, and it's a lot of conversations and very little action. So let's talk and more action. I fully agree with you, Wendy. Do we have any questions from our audience members before we close this panel discussion? No?
Anyone? Yeah?
Hello. Yeah. So I have one question for Wendy. Yeah. So in education sector, I'm sure there's as you mentioned, continuous learning is something very useful. And obviously, I'm a Flip Jungle and CEO founder of Flip Jungle, and we are currently targeting primary school. But those kids, when they turning into like adult, 10 years later, there's the whole job opportunity will be different than what we are seeing at the moment. So do you have any prediction of what type of continuous learning in terms of giving them like a STEM area, or like any specific area you like to give us some idea? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tim. Yeah, I think in order to provide a solution, you need to acknowledge what problem you are solving. So primary school forms the foundation of learning, right? But we cannot take for granted that there are challenges beyond just the learning that these learners are facing. And if we are looking at the South African context and the rest of Africa, very similar. Those learners are probably facing with social ills, facing with hunger, facing with all those other factors that are competing against the ability to learn. So when you are looking at a solution for that, like what you are doing, you have to be mindful that those formative years is, in our context, highly impacted by everything else. So the solution you present should be multifaceted, not just focus on the one side of the learning journey, but as the child as a whole, right? And I always say this, who are you solving that problem for? You spoke earlier about the child being at the center of that solution. Then re-look that solution. If you're looking at us specifically, the Western Cape or the South Africa, you're going to look at what that child needs, where they are located, what do they need, and whether your solution is really equitable, inclusive, and will make a change, or is it only for a select few of the learners that are ready to receive. And like you said earlier, we need to move away from having solutions that are geared towards one small issue and not a challenge that those learners face. So for you, go back, go look at, engage with us around intelligence of what could be good for the learners, how that can be expanded on, and see whether your solution ties in to the need that is currently experienced.
Okay, if there are no further questions, then I'm going to wrap up this panel discussion. Thank you very much. Your insights, once again, proved invaluable. And I just think, to close on your point, Elizabeth, let's talk more action, both from the investors and the startups' point of view as well. Transparency across the board. If everyone is honest with each other around what they measure, what they see to be important, what they can actually do, then capital will flow in the direction that it needs to, and not necessarily that it wants to go to. So with that, I'll say thank you and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.